Okay, so we are going live, and which means that our questions are going to go out to the whole world. And so I don't know if anybody's going to type in the answers or not, but I have 3 trivia questions, and I'll give you the trivia question. It's open Bible. If you don't know the answer, the first one to give the answer can give the answer. Now, the only special rule is no electronic devices. Okay, you can't use your electronic device to search for the answer, all right? So that's the rule. And so I'll give you the question, and after I give you the question, the first one to give me the answer is to choose a song, and we'll sing one stanza of the song of your choice. Okay, is everybody ready? All right, so here's the first question. Very fine print. Very fine print. Oh, okay, there we go. What was the name of the orator that accused Paul before Felix? What was the name of the orator that accused Paul before Felix? Go, 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 go. Yes.
Tertullus?
Yes, very good. It's Tertullus, and that you can find that in Acts chapter 24, verses 1 and 2. Okay, so that's where that's found. That's the name of the guy that accused Paul before Felix. So, what song?
Let's try 299, one sharp.
299 with one sharp.
Oh, happy day.
Oh, happy day. You know, they really messed this song up big time back in the 70s. Will do the right way. Okay. How many people know the song? Oh, happy day. Here we go. 299 verse 1. Oh, happy day, fix my joys on thee, my Savior and my God. Well, may this glowing heart rejoice until its rapture all upon. Happy day, when Jesus washed my sins away. He taught me how to watch and pray, and live rejoicing every day. Happy day, when Jesus washed my sins away. All right, so now that was the first one. If we were doing teams like we normally do, that would have been one for the guys. But seeing that we only have a handful of ladies here, it would be so unfair, wouldn't it? It would be so unfair. It takes, what, 2 or 3 ladies, to equal one guy? Is that right? No? I'm saying that because there's not many of them here to beat me up. So, just kidding. She said, that's it. You have no more piano player. Let's see what you do now, mister. Okay. All right, so here's the second question. Here we go. Where does it say, in the Bible, where does it say, and the lion shall lay down with the lamb? Where does it say that?
Yeah, chapter and verse.
Yeah.
You want the book or the exact?
Well, if you can give me the book of the chapter, yeah. I'll tell you what, just give me the book. Don't say Bible. That's, I'm sorry, that's wrong.
Daniel.
Huh?
Daniel.
No, that's wrong too.
Oh, 3 wrong. Revelation.
Look,
You only get one shot.
you only get one shot.
Where's that fancy Bible with the words in
Where does it say, and the lion shall lay down with the lamb?
Can we ask, is it in the Old Testament or New Testament?
Okay, it's in the Old Testament. Okay. The answer is in the Old Testament. He said Isaiah, and that would be the right book if it were there. Everybody give up?
Jeremiah.
No. No. Okay, all right. Turn to Isaiah chapter 11, verse 6. And we'll give it to Brother Darrell to get the song, even though he's not exactly right. But you'll see why in just a minute. Isaiah chapter 11 and verse 6. And what does it say? It says, the wolf also shall dwell with the lamb. Oh. It doesn't say the lion shall lay down with the lamb. And the leopard shall lay down with the kid. Oh, it doesn't say the lion shall lay down with the lamb, does it? And the calf and the young lion and the fatling together, and a little child shall lead them. It doesn't say the lion shall lay down with the lamb.
So the answer is no way.
Nowhere. The answer is it doesn't say that in the Bible anywhere, but everybody thinks it's Isaiah chapter, well, everybody thinks it's in Isaiah, but that's not what the verse says at all. Isn't that amazing? Yeah, I came across that in my morning reading a few days ago, and I was like, and the lion, wait, that doesn't say lion, it says wolf. Hold on a minute. So then I did a search, and nowhere in the Bible does it say the lion shall lay down with the lamb. All right? So there you have it. So, Daryl, what's your song?
215.
215 in the round. 215? Okay. Is it a nice hard song?
I don't know.
Oh, it's too easy. All right,
Yeah.
we'll have to go. My Jesus, I love thee, I know thou art mine. For thee all the follies of sin I resign. My gracious Redeemer, my Savior, art thou. If ever I love thee, my Jesus, 'tis now. Okay, here's the last one. Wasn't that fun? A question that's not in the Bible, but everybody thinks it is. It's kind of like cleanliness is next to godliness. That's not in there either. All right? This too shall pass. That's not in there. Look it up. You'll find out it's not in there. That one actually came from a Muslim writer. And this too shall pass. That's actually from a Muslim writer. And most people think it's in the Bible, but it's not. Yeah. Wow. Boy, are we biblically ignorant sometimes. Okay, last question. Here we go. What was the second miracle that Jesus did in Galilee?
Was it healing Peter's mother-in-law?
No, sir. So close. It wasn't him.
Was it the water of wine?
No.
That was Dr.
Okay, that's two big players that are out. You were a big player, but you're not now. Now you're a big bystander. You observe. It specifically says that this is the second miracle. The second miracle that Jesus did in Galilee specifically says that. Dun, 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 dun.
Would you like to tell us a miracle, maybe?
No,
That
that would be the answer to the question.
Oh, I thought maybe.
No, the question was specifically, and I quote myself, quote, what was the second miracle that Jesus did in Galilee? Unquote. Quoting myself.
You do.
Healing of the leper?
Yes, we had a healing. Sorry, you're out. Somebody is not the guy's name, so you're out. Anybody else want to take a shot? We're not doing so well. Okay, turn to John chapter 4, verse 54, and I get to choose the song. John chapter 4, verse 54. And who's there? Who wants to read that? Okay, go for it.
John 4:54. This is again the second miracle that Jesus did when he was come out of Judea into
Okay, so what was the miracle? Look, the verses earlier on, the first few verses above that. What was it?
the Father knew that it was at the same time in which Jesus sent him by his son
Okay, so it was a nobleman's son. The nobleman's son was healed, and that is the second miracle that Jesus did in Galilee. Right? Okay. Now, he had done other miracles in Judea because Nicodemus mentioned that. Nicodemus said, we know that you're a man sent from God because of the things that you're doing, so we know. But in Galilee, specifically, as the verse says, this is the second miracle. And I get to choose a song, and I want to choose Standing on the Solid Rock. And let's all stand. We'll sing one verse to that. Page 20, I'm sorry. I guess not everybody has the song memorized. I should probably give you the numbers. Page 20. Let's all stand. Let's sing nice and loud, okay? Through my disappointment, strife and discontentment, I cast my every care upon the Lord. No matter what obsession, pain or deep depression, I'm standing on the solid rock. I'm standing on the rock of ages, safe from every storm. All the storm that rages, rich in love and rich. Out from Satan's wages, standing on the solid rock. Amen. That was, wasn't that fun? Amen. Y'all may be seated. Acts chapter 20. We're starting in Acts chapter 20 today for our verse-by-verse study through the New Testament. And I'm looking down in my Bible at Isaiah. Why am I? Oh, I'm in Isaiah because of the question, right? Okay, so we will start in Acts chapter 20. And I want to read the first... Let's see, what would be a good chunk to read? By the way, this morning, I said, let's all read together. And we didn't? What happened? Huh? I noticed that. It was like everybody got quiet. As soon as they knew that we were live, nobody wanted to read. Come on. Have a little confidence, right? Acts chapter 20, we're going to read verses 1 through 4 all together. And then after that, I'll pray, and then we'll get into the study of the Word. Acts chapter 20, starting in verse 1. And after the uproar was ceased, Paul called unto him the disciples, and embraced them, and departed for to go into Macedonia. And when he had gone over those parts, he had given them much exhortation, he came into Greece, and there abode 3 months. And when the Jews laid wait for him, as he was about to sail into Syria, he purposed to return through Macedonia. And there accompanied him into Asia Sopater of Berea, and of the Thessalonians, Aristarchus and Secundus, and Gaius of Derbe, and Timotheus, and of Asia, Tychicus and Trophimus. That's why I wanted everyone to read with me, because I love when we get to read these names. And as I've said a million times, I wish their names were simple, like Bill and Bob and John, but they're not. You get, Trophimus and Secundus and things like that. But anyway, so we're starting Acts chapter 20. And you remember from Acts chapter 19, there were riots in Ephesus, and they were shouting, "Great is Diana of the Ephesians." And they had grabbed some of Paul's team and taken them into the theater, which, by the way, was not a drive-in movie theater, nor an AMC theater. It's the kind of theater where they kill people by feeding them to lions and tigers and bears. Oh my. Anyway, so all of this was happening, and a man steps forward who is the town clerk, who has some authority, and he quiets them down and says, look, we can't be doing this. We're going to be in big trouble, if we do this sort of thing and we don't have a good answer for what's going on. So he quieted them down. He sends them all home. And so that's what happens at the end of verse 41. It says, and when he had thus spoken, he dismissed the assembly. And then chapter 20, starting in verse 1, it says, and after the uproar was ceased. So chapter 20 starts immediately on the end of the riot being broken up, and everyone sent home. And so after the uproar was ceased, Paul called unto him his disciples. So chapter 20, we find Paul leaving Ephesus, having barely escaped the idolaters who want to kill him, and he moves on to Macedonia. I think it's kind of neat the way it says that in verse 3, where, and when the Jews laid wait for him as he was about to sail into Syria, he said, I'm not going there, I'm going into Macedonia, because they're not going to expect that. And so he kind of changes directions. Anyway, so they still want to get him, they still want to kill him. The Jews are still trying to track him down. Now, we're not told much about what he did in the stop-off points along the way. It just kind of hits the points and he moves on. But we're given a fuller description of the team in verse 4. And so verse 4 says, and there accompanied him into Asia, and then we get the list of names that we don't like to read, right? So we're given a fuller description of the team there. And Luke lists a total of 7 people, not including himself or Paul. So you've got at least 9 people that are now traveling together as a missions team. This is a pretty healthy missions team. So when we go up in the villages and the van has 9 people in it, we're biblical, amen? So the majority of the team, they move ahead to Troas in the chapter. As we go through the chapter, you'll see this. And then they wait for Paul to arrive. Now, apparently, there was already a church there, so Paul preaches a rather lengthy message, and it's in this chapter, in chapter 20, where a young man falls asleep and falls out of the window. And what was his name? I'll tell you his name, and then I'll tell you an easy way to remember it. Okay? His name is Eutychus. Easy way to remember it? Eutychus too, if you fell out of the window. All right? So you'll never forget it again. His name was Eutychus. And so he falls out of the window, and Paul, of course, goes down and basically heals him. He raises him from the dead. And after this, then Paul continues in his travels toward Jerusalem, because remember, for several chapters now, he's talked about going to Jerusalem. This is where he's heading. He wants to get to Jerusalem. And so on the way, he wants to be in Jerusalem for the feast, by the way, for the feast of Pentecost. That's his thing. He wants to get there by the feast of Pentecost. But they stop into Miletus. He doesn't want to go all the way into Ephesus, which is some distance away, but he stops into Miletus and he calls the Ephesian elders to him. And so in chapter 20, we get one of the more memorable warnings of Paul to the church concerning false teachers that would rise up among them and that sort of thing. He speaks of wolves from within and from without. He speaks of the church as Christ's purchased possession. Did you know that? We speak of ourselves as being bought with a price, but guess what? The church is too, right? So as a whole, we're bought by the blood of Christ, and as individuals, we're bought by the blood of Christ. How's that possible? Because individuals make up the church. The church is not the building, the church is people, right? So we keep that in mind. So if there's one more thing that I'd like to point out, it's that we never see Paul inactive. No matter what's going on, wherever he's traveling, he's not inactive in his faith. He's always busy in the service of Christ, winning souls to the kingdom, edifying believers, doing the work of God everywhere he went. And that was his life. Paul did Paul have a normal job like you and I? Yes? What was it? He was a tent maker. So sometimes he would travel to a place and he would set up shop, if you will, and make tents in order to support the team. But it was all focused on doing the work of, the ministry that he had. Now, that's not true for most of us. Most of us, we have jobs we go to and we do things, and I understand that. But in Paul's case, this is his life. This is all he does. So we should not be surprised to find, just a little mention of, and Paul and Aquilus and Priscilla sat down and made some tents so that they could have some money so they could eat, So we're just giving a quick, blurb, and then it moves on, and we should expect that. So with that, let's get into the verse-by-verse study, picking up in verse 1. And after the uproar was ceased, Paul called unto him the disciples and embraced them and departed for to go into Macedonia. Now remember, for the last chapter, Paul wanted to confront those who had taken his traveling companions because they couldn't find Paul. He was there. He was going to go into the midst, but the disciples did not allow it. So at the end of the riot, Paul decides, well, it's time to leave. The door here is closed. It's time to go. So he bids farewell to the believers, and he leaves town. And so it's an emotional farewell. I imagine the hugs and the tears and so forth. And Paul continues on his journey. And keep in mind that his plan is to go to Jerusalem. If you look back in Acts chapter 19, verse 21, it said, after these things were ended, Paul purposed in the Spirit, when he had passed through Macedonia and Achaia, to go to Jerusalem, saying, after I have been there, I must also see Rome. So there were two spots in Paul's mind that he was going to go to. Jerusalem, that's the next big one. I'm going to be there. Then after I'm done in Jerusalem, I'm going to go to Rome. So those are the two big stopping points in Paul's mind. Everything else along the way, he didn't go, well, I'm actually just going to Jerusalem, so there's no sense in me witnessing here in Macedonia. No, all along the way, every step of the way, he continued doing the Lord's will. So he's on his way. Now keep in mind that Paul had left from Ephesus. He left from Ephesus, and now he's actually, he's heading the opposite way from Jerusalem. He wants to go to Jerusalem, but he's going the opposite way. He heads north through Macedonia and then down into Greece. Why? Because the Jews expected him to go the other way. And that's not the way he went. So it's clear that Paul has a plan. He has a plan. He knows how long it's going to take in order to complete his plan, and he moves on. You've probably met people. I know I've met people that they've got this idea that serving the Lord is all about not having a plan, but every day as the Lord leads. Now, the Lord does need to lead, but let me tell you something. The Lord can lead in planning and prayer and preparation ahead of time, just as well as he can do it spur of the moment if necessary. So, I remember a few years ago, I was talking to somebody, and I think most of you all know, usually you get Sunday's sermon when? Is anybody reading those emails? Am I wasting my time?
Well, lately we've been getting on Sunday.
Yeah, Sunday nights when I get home, or Monday, or sometimes Tuesday. But you're getting the sermon that I'm going to preach 5 or 6 days ahead of time. And so somebody asked me why I did that. And I said, well, I do that because my translator needs a chance to look it over and make sure that he knows, what I'm going to be saying. And I pretty much manuscripted. If you ever get the desire to do so, you can actually pull up the notes and follow along and see that I pretty much stick to the notes as much as I can. And Brother Young and I, we have kind of this thing. He knows if I'm going to get off the notes because I'll get out of the pulpit. And he knows when I step out of the pulpit that I'm not looking at my notes. So that's kind of and then I slow down. You might have noticed, you might not have noticed, but that is, so for us, that is a pre-planned thing that we do. And so this person I was talking to said, well, how can you pre-plan all of that? Where's the leading of the Lord in all of that? I was like, well, the Lord knows that this is my situation. The Lord knows this is what is necessary in order for me to help the Korean people of our church who don't have as much of a grasp on English as some of us do. They need it. And so we do it. And the Lord knows that. So guess what? He's there in pre-planning. And once you get that, once you understand that God can lead you, in all of those things ahead of time, then you don't have to struggle with these, I call them hyper-spiritual thoughts of, well, how's the Lord going to lead you? I've met preachers who their approach to preaching is they get up on Sunday morning and they get to the pulpit and they open their Bible and they look down at whatever it falls open to, they're led of the Lord, and then they preach. No prior study, no prior preparation. They tell me they study a lot of stuff all the time anyway, so they're prepared for whatever comes up. I hope so, because I surely wouldn't want to sit under a message of a guy that didn't prepare before he preached. And so the Lord can guide in preparation. So Paul has a long-term plan. I'm going to Jerusalem, and then I'm going to go to Rome. And all along the way, he's serving the Lord as the Lord leads him in all these little stops. And that needs to be our approach to life, allowing the Lord to lead us in every little stop along the way. Now notice verse 2. When he had gone over those parts, we don't get a lot there. In verse 1, it just simply says, he went to go into Macedonia, and when he had gone over those parts. We're given no detail at all. I can't imagine that Paul was just kind of traveling and saying nothing to nobody. But we're given no detail. Paul didn't simply travel through the parts of Macedonia. I'm sure he took time to exhort the believers in each place. He had been there before to try to help them out as much as he could on his way. We're not told here in this quick synopsis of his travel points, but Paul could have very easily gone to any number of places. We don't really know where exactly he went, but he could have gone to Philippi, he could have gone to Berea, he could have gone to Thessalonica, he could have gone to Neapolis. These are major places that he would have passed by or passed through, and he could have stopped there for a day or two and, gotten a good night's sleep or whatever. And I'm sure in those places where he had ministered to people, he would have wanted to touch base with somebody. But we're not told anything about that. But he goes through Macedonia, and then what does he do? He turns south and he heads toward Greece. And he may have stopped through Athens, and it would have been natural to sail from Athens down to Greece, but we don't really know because we're not told. So if we're not told something and we have to preach by saying words like, maybe he did this, or he may have done that, what do we learn from that? Is there anything that we can learn from the silence of Scripture? Or the silence of the congregation? What?
God only wants us to go so far. And
Okay.
he has certain teachings.
All right? So in other words, it's not important. It's not important to my walk. If God didn't tell me, I didn't need to know. We know it happened. Somehow he had to travel. But we don't get the details. So the details aren't important. So he turns and he heads toward Greece. And there's another small part of Paul's plan that I think bears mentioning. Because we know that Paul wrote to the Corinthian church in 1 Corinthians chapter 16 that they should take up a collection and that they should help the believers in Jerusalem. All right, so this is one of, who knows how many reasons Paul had for wanting to get to Jerusalem. And that's where he had plans to go. And so he mentions this, that he told the churches in Galatia to do the same thing. So 1 Corinthians chapter 16, verses 1 through 4. And who's there? 1 Corinthians 16, verses 1 through 4. You there, Kenny?
Sure.
Would you read those verses for me?
Now concerning the collection for the saints, as I have given order to the churches of Galatia, even so do ye. Upon the first day of the week, let every one of you lay by hand in store, as God hath prospered, that there be no gatherings when I come. And when I come, whosoever ye shall approve by your letters, then will I send to bring your liberality unto Jerusalem. And if it be meet that I go also, they shall go with me.
Right, so he's taking up a collection. Why? Does anybody know why? Okay, I'll give you a hint. It's in Acts chapter 11, verse 28. Why is he taking up a collection? Huh? Something. I thought you found it already. Is anybody there? Yeah, Acts 11:28.
It's a great start.
A great dearth. Okay, great. What's a dearth? Dearth is a famine. So there's supposed to be a great famine that would come during the days of Claudius Caesar. Historically, we know that there were actually several periods during Claudius' reign for 13 years, and there were actually several periods of intense famine. So the point that I'm seeking to make is that Paul was not just traveling and preaching, but he had a plan. There was some preparation there. Not only preparation as to where he was going to go, but also a plan as to why he was going to go there. So he had given a lot of thought to that. He's not just traveling or hopping all over the world. There's persecution here, so I'll run there. Persecution here, so I'll run there. He's got a plan, and he is following it as well as he can. So that leads us up to verse 3, where it says, and there he abode 3 months. So in verse 2, he comes into Greece, and he stays in Greece for 3 months. And when the Jews laid wait for him, it took him 3 months, but he finally got around up again. And when the Jews laid wait for him, as he was about to sail into Syria, he purposed to return through Macedonia. Okay, Greece. What do we know about Greece, other than the fact that we use it to cook things with? What do we know about Greece? Where is Greece? Please don't say in the frying pan. Somewhere in Europe.
Modern day Greece.
Modern day Greece is the same place. What? Okay, so it is. Is it an island or a peninsula or what? I heard a lot of rumor. What is it? Yeah, it's an island. It was a well-known and well-traveled seaport, the island was, for people to travel from there to go to lots of other places. All right? So he is there, and they expect him to sail into Syria, which would have been, the route that, knowing that he was going to go to Jerusalem, that seems like the logical route, but instead he purposefully returns through Macedonia. So Paul's in Greece for 3 months, and most likely, I'm sure he would have stayed, maybe he would have stayed in Corinth, who knows? Though the verse doesn't tell us that exactly. However, he did mention the possibility of doing this in 1 Corinthians chapter 16, verses 5 through 7. It says this, now I will come unto you when I shall pass through Macedonia, for I do pass through Macedonia. And it may be that I will abide yea and winter with you, that you may bring me on my journey, whithersoever I go. For I will not seek you now by the way, but I trust to tarry a while with you, if the Lord permits. So maybe he stopped into Corinth again. We really don't know, because we're not giving you details. But knowing that the Jews were waiting and watching for him, he did what they didn't expect. Instead of sailing on from Cenchreae, is where he probably would have sailed from, which was the eastern port, by the way, he heads back through Macedonia, and there he plans to take a trip or take a ship from there. sometimes things don't go as planned. Isn't that true? The last 2.5 months has not been as planned. No doubt. We missed a lot of wonderful things that I really had planned for us. But it's the Lord's, the Lord's doing. So that's that. And sometimes things don't go as planned in the ministry. And we need, as believers, and I think it's really kind of important for us to understand this right now. We need to be able to see the big picture and to adapt to meet the mission. There is the mission. What is the mission? Yes, sir.
Spreading the gospel and making people disciples of that.
Okay, so you're referring to the Great Commission, right? Great Commission. Okay, so let me give you 3 quick E's to help you remember what the church is supposed to be doing all the time. We don't do them one at a time. We're supposed to be doing all 3 of them all the time. Okay. One is to evangelize the lost. Okay. I said evangelize the saved. That's messed up, isn't it? Evangelize the lost. All right. The second one is to edify the saved. And the third one is to exalt the Savior. Those are the 3 things that the church is supposed to be doing. That's our mission. That's the big picture. Okay. Sometimes in our plans, we plan to do this or we plan to do that, and sometimes we can't. So what do? Well, this is our plan, and we're going to do it because if we can't do this exactly the way we think we should, then we're not going to be able to meet the mission. No, there's lots of ways to meet the mission. Let's just take one point. Evangelizing the lost. What are some ways that we can do that? All right, there's a good way right there, right? You point at the computer. There we go. There's one way. Yes.
Hand out gospel tracts.
Hand out gospel tracts. What else? Yes.
Street preaching.
Street preaching. What else? Yes.
Witnessing to people at work.
Witnessing to people at work. What else? See, so far on the computer, street preaching, handing out gospel tracts, witnessing to people at work. Are there other ways? We only got 4? Yeah?
Village evangelism.
Village evangelism. Okay, there's 5. Scratching your eye. Yeah. Ah, okay, through education. Yes. All right. Anything else? How about medical missions? There's a lot of that going on. All right. Medical missions. How else? Medical missions, a doctor goes to some place, some country where maybe people are poor, and he offers himself free services or exceedingly cheap services. And while he's working with them, he gets a chance to talk to them about the Lord. Okay. What else?
Prison mission.
Prison ministries. Okay. Now we're up to 8 so far. Yes?
Old age homes.
What?
Old age homes.
Oh, rest homes. I used to do a lot of that.
Feedback on the James Children's Division of the Godfather.
Fatherless and the widows. So,
So there's the
orphanages.
and the widows in that
Okay.
same vein.
Yeah, so we got 11 now. Orphans and widows. That's 11. Any others? Well, we could probably go on and on and on. People have been, in the last 2,000 years, Christians have found all kinds of different ways to get the word out. All right? But if you have a plan that, this happens to us sometimes. We make a plan to go to village evangelism, and then we wake up on Saturday morning and it's raining. And we know we can still go, but the Bible's going to get wet, we're going to get wet, and we're not going to really meet anybody. So, why? If, or we could be, dead set in the middle of the winter, and we're going to go out on Bible Blitz, even though it's minus 37,000 degrees, and we're going to freeze half to death. And, bless God, we're not going to let cold stop us from going out and evangelizing. And so we go out and we freeze half to death and don't meet anybody because ain't nobody else going out in the cold either. Right? So sometimes plans have to change. Does that mean we're not going to meet the mission? Of course not. We just find a different way. Right? So we need to keep that in mind. Sometimes ministry doesn't go as planned. We just have to be able to see the big picture. And when it doesn't go the way we want, then we adapt to meet the mission. It burdened me a lot when this whole coronavirus thing started because I knew what that meant. We're not going to be able to go to villages, and we're not going to be able to go out and hand out Bibles and tracts. I knew that because you're out there, and, we typically pass out 100 or 200 Bibles and tracts every time we go out. That means you're meeting 100 or 200 people in the city. That any one of them could be sick. And now you got it, you bring it in, and everybody else gets sick. And, Brother Young, who has no immunity system, could very well not even live. Or Brother Duke could take it home to his wife, and she might not live. And so, common sense tells me I didn't need the government to tell me that that's not smart. All right? So I'm sitting at home after about 2 weeks into this going, man, what are we going to do here? Yeah, we can witness in our private life, and we should. But as a church, what are we doing? And then all of a sudden, we get an email from a Muslim guy who wants to know the gospel. And I'm like, there it is. We can still meet the mission. We just have to do it differently. All right? So we have to be wise in that. Look at the big picture and then adapt. Verse 4, Acts 20 and verse 4 now, moving on. There accompanied him into Asia Sopater of Berea, and of the Thessalonians, Aristarchus and Secundus. So in the future, Bible trivia question, where is Secundus from? Thessalonica, that's right. Because he was of the Thessalonians. And Gaius of Derbe, like the hat. And Timotheus, probably from Derbe, maybe from Lystra. We're not sure exactly which one of those places for Timotheus. And of Asia, Tychicus and Trophimus. So, he mentions the team here. It's interesting to me the way that Paul built his team. How did he build his team? Well, before you give a quick answer, let me just say he didn't. Paul didn't go out to build a team. He didn't say, I'm going to go get this guy because he's a good preacher. I'm going to go get this guy because he's a good songwriter. He didn't build the team. He focused on the mission. And God brought them in that were needful to him. So, passing through Macedonia, Paul's team has now grown to 7 men, not counting himself, not counting Luke. And the fruit of his ministry was not just churches, but men who are now dedicated to doing the work of Christ, preaching and planting churches as they're going along. So we have Sopater, who is Sopater's mentioned here. He's from the church in Berea. Remember that church? They searched the scriptures daily, whether these things were so, right? Great church. That's where he was from. Aristarchus of Thessalonica, and he was with Paul for quite some time, by the way. You see him mentioned, in Colossians chapter 4 and verse 10, years later. Secundus, we don't know anything about him except he's mentioned here. Part of the team, right? The backup guys that are just as important as the other guys, right? And then Gaius he had been a pastor in Rome, and this is what we know about him. You can read in 3 John chapter 1 verse 1 about him, or Romans 16 verse 23. Then Timotheus, better known as Timothy, right? 1 Timotheus and 2 Timotheus is not what we say nowadays. We say 1 and 2 Timothy. Timotheus is just the old, what's the word I'm looking for? Greek way of saying Timothy. And so he's one of Paul's most faithful, workers from Derbe or Lystra. And I like, take a look at Timothy someday. You're going to find out that Paul describes Timothy in three ways. He calls him his son. In one place he calls him his son. And he also calls him a fellow laborer. I love that. He calls him a brother. So Paul trained up Timothy, and Timothy went from being a worker under Paul to being a co-equal worker with Paul. This is what we do in ministry. This is what we do with people. We train them and bring them up. This is one of the church's missions, right? Edifying the saints, okay? And so this is happening in Timotheus' life. And Tychicus, apparently from Colossus, but he meets up with Paul here, and he's mentioned 5 times in the New Testament, by the way, Tychicus is. And I'll let you go ahead and look up those places on your own. Then Trophimus, he's mentioned in 2 Timothy chapter 4, verse 20, which means Trophimus had been with us for a long time, right? With his team for a long time as well. And Paul had others as well. We've got, Luke, who wrote Luke and Acts, and there were probably others as well, because, we know that there were others as well, because when he gets to 2 Timothy chapter 4, verses 9 through 11, he gives us a list of names that's not included here. So Paul's team, they didn't stay around all the time. Some of them did, but some of them did not. And you got the bad guys like Demas. Demas hath forsaken me, having loved this present world, and is departed into Thessalonica. Then you have Titus who left, but who left for a different reason. And then you had others that stayed. So the members of the team changed. The only person that was always there, and even Luke wasn't always there. You read the book of Acts, and there are times when you find we, Luke is there. Sometimes you find they, Luke was not there. So even Luke wasn't always there. But the bottom line is this. The team changed, but Paul didn't. Why not? Why is Paul the only consistent one? Is he the only one that really cared to see it through to the end? Is that the way we should see this? No? Okay. Yes, sir?
You are specifically chosen.
Okay, so Paul was the one that was called to that work. And God sent people in to support that as necessary. And they would come and they would support that, and then maybe the Lord would lead them on to somewhere else and send somebody else in. That's the way it works in the ministry. I learned a long, long time ago that nobody, absolutely, don't feel offended when I say this, because you have to understand the reason why it's this way. But nobody cares about this church as much as I do, humanly speaking. Of course, the Lord, but not counting the Lord. Nobody cares about it as much as I do. Why? Because this is what God has called me to. God has called you here temporarily, and maybe who knows how long you'll be here. Who knows, you might be leaving next year. We could go to war and all be gone tomorrow. Who knows? But all I know is that I've seen people come and people go. Good people that love God, who are still serving God, and they were serving God when they came, they were serving God when they left. They were serving God, right? So that's just something for us to keep in mind. Now, these men were willing to sacrifice all the same things that Paul would. And sometimes we talk about Paul. Oh, Paul, he went through all of this. He was shipwrecked. He was beaten. He was stoned. He was left for dead, yada, yada, yada. Well, these men were with him all along the way. And nobody ever says, oh, man, poor Tychicus or poor Trophimus, or, they were with Paul and they got beat up. And nobody ever talks about them. It's always Paul, right? The road that we walk, though we may be as faithful as possible, and the road that we walk in faithfulness may not include greatness. We may never be mentioned. You may never be known in this life. I was dealing with a person last night, and we were talking about, leaving this world. He's an older man, and he was talking about how he is going to pass away soon. He wanted to, just have a normal life and experience life before he goes, because he's really had a hard time in life. And I shared with him, I said, the only thing I want to do is make a mark. But in making a mark, I don't necessarily want to make a name. If you make a name, that's fine. But the important thing is to make a mark for the Lord. So in serving the Lord, sometimes it's not God's will that everybody be well known. Because if everybody were well known, then nobody would be well known, right? We'd all be on the equal grounds again. But it's His will that we all be faithful. Maybe not well known, but faithful. That's His will. So again, keep in mind that Paul was headed ultimately to Jerusalem, and along the way he is exhorting and he's preaching and that sort of thing. But he knows, and he's known for some time now, that when he gets to Jerusalem, what's going to happen to him? Yeah, he's already been warned. He's already been warned. But he's going anyway. And that's a challenge. Would you follow God's will? If the Lord said to you, I want you to go to North Korea, and I want you to preach in the streets of Pyongyang, and you're going to die, but I want you to do it. Of course, that hasn't happened, so we don't know how we respond, but the question is, in my heart, I would like to be willing to do whatever God wants. But if God asked me to do something I really, really didn't want to do, whether it's that or something even less, like eat fish, would I be willing? That's a big question. And that's not a question that we can answer now, but when the call comes, that's when we have to answer those kinds of questions. So we'll stop here today. We'll come back to Acts chapter 20 and verse 5, picking up in verse 5 next week. Any questions or comments before we close?
The attorney Mark.
Mark.
I can only think of what I've seen is Marxism has caused division among you. That's a negative thing.
Okay.
But I was thinking more.
In Proverbs, there's another mark that says, "Mark the perfect man."
Right, but that's what they're not thinking about making a difference.
Yes.
And that's June 22.
Well, that type of mark. I press toward the mark for the prize of the high calling of God in Christ Jesus.
Living and making a difference, and some having compassion, making a difference.
There you go. Some having compassion, making a difference. So there we leave the mark. Okay. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
So Paul knew there was a worldwide famine coming,
Yes.
right?
From Acts chapter 11. They were in that.
And he prepared for that. For
Yes.
action.
Right.
So there's a lesson to be learned for it.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. So if you know tough times are
If you
coming,
know tough times are coming,
you need
you need to get prepared. The reason why, by the way, the reason why the Lord lets us in on information like that is so that we can get prepared. All right? So we should be wise in those things. Anyone else? Okay, let's close in prayer. And Kenny, why don't you come up here and click the button for me. So we'll close in prayer and then we'll be dismissed. Thank you so much, Lord, for your grace, and thank you for your word. It's Lord, just wonderful to be able to be back in your house and to be able to share in fellowship with one another and preach a word. Though there are still many who have not found their way back yet, I pray to encourage their hearts and just do a great work in our church. Make us what you want us to be. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, we'll be dismissed.